experience since you started the training, and after the training, what has been your experience working for these companies?
Sure. Well, when I arrived to the training, I didn't have really any experience at all in Exchange or Skype for Business in general. I did have a background in Windows Server management, so that definitely helped on the transition to this technology. That was really interesting during the training. Start with several versions of Exchange, the virtual machines, and then transition to Skype for Business and do the same. Obviously, the coexistence with the group that we were assigned or batch, it was really great having people from all around the world, basically. There were the ups and downs and everything, but so far it was great. Just fresh out of the training, yeah, my first project was pretty challenging. It was probably the technology that is the most complex of the ones that we manage, that is in Skype for Business.
Yeah, it is.
They originally, the idea for them was to have just really a short-term engineer. They got basically a project to migrate enterprise voice from Cisco solution to Skype for Business. So my first steps in the journey was to travel to Los Angeles and help to install an SBC compatible with Skype for Business that will help them with this transition. So within the course of a week, I was there to install this equipment connected to the correct, basically all the setup with the network, with the voice, etc. Also help the users with this transition. So because we will be removing all the basically the phones that they will have in the desk, they will be replaced by Skype for Business compatible headsets. I help also make sure that the basically the compatible phones that will be in conference rooms or the managers' offices will also install and configure correctly with the corresponding Skype accounts. Helping create the accounts for each of these conference rooms that they got, or basically all the necessary steps to do this transition.
I would like to explain why an Skype for Business is the most complex project that we can get, right? You already mentioned about the network stuff. So the voice is really sensitive. So before deploy a project like this, we need to validate everything, right? That we have the correct switches, that we have the correct access points for the wireless, that we have all the metrics about the performance in the network. For example, part of the deployment of Skype for Business, we need to create an assessment for the network in the company to see if everything is prepared to support the Skype for Business or another project like this. There is a whole process, and it's the reason why a lot of people or consultants, they don't want this kind of projects, because it's not only, let's say, the Microsoft Skype for Business or Teams that we need to deploy, right? So we need to work very close with other teams. For example, server team, network team, security teams, for the firewalls, for all the networks and for all the servers. Yes, it's one of the most complex projects, and was the first one for you?
Yeah, definitely, definitely a challenge from learning to run, but that was interesting, definitely. This was a major beer brewing company all around the world. And they got over 70,000 Skype for Business enabled users. So wow, that's definitely something that, for example, we will not, probably will not be lucky to work in a company so big, for instance, working from Mexico, for example. Mm-hmm. So that was definitely a great experience.
Also, I would like to add that the complexity of this project is the enterprise voice, right? So we have different solutions. For example, some companies, they have Cisco. Other companies, they have Avaya. Some companies, they have all the enterprise voice handled by a different team, right? Even when the enterprise voice is part of the messaging collaboration, right? So some companies, the PBX and all the enterprise voice is on charge of the network team, for example, right? So is really a challenge because at the end of the day, we as messaging engineer, we need to integrate everything in the same box, right? So work again very close with all the different teams. And also, Omar, I would like to explain to everyone how the Skype for Business works in the back end, right? I would like to explain in the very high level, and please help me to explain the best way, right? So let me share my screen in order to present a slide. Can you see my screen, Omar?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you. I can see you screen perfectly.
Perfect. So because the Skype for Business use something called zip domain. So that means that we are going to use the same domain. For example, this company is the abc.com. Of course, we need the domain controllers, depends on the company. For example, that company that you are talking about, I guess they have more than 100 domain controllers because they have presence around the world, right? So, and they have different branches offices. So of course, we need a domain controllers. In some point, we need to deploy the certificates. So it's the reason why we need to add the CA role to the Active Directory. Okay, so in Skype for Business, we have two different versions. We have the standard version that this is not recommended for large corporation because it doesn't support high availability. But talking about the enterprise version, we have the databases hosted in the SQL server. So we need to have SQL server in our environment. In this case, in order to have a fault tolerance or high availability, we need to deploy this cluster, okay? SQL has different high availability solutions, but there is only one that is supported by Skype for Business, that is mirroring. It's something like a deep passive solution, right? So one server is doing all the job, but internally is transferring all the transaction, all the information to the second server, just in case something happens in the first server, the second one will do all the job, right? So it's gonna be ready. So is the reason why we need to have more than one server just to have that fault tolerant solutions. I always explain the front end servers as the most important role in Skype for Business. Why? Because the front end hosts all the users, all the settings, all the information. Even it has other databases. They use SQL Express Edition because sometimes they store temporary information or for example, when you are in a meeting, you appear as busy or in a call, that information doesn't go to the SQL server, it's stored locally. And also the front end is the role that receive all the requests from internally or externally users, right? So it's the reason why I said that is the most important. So we as administrators, we need to take care a lot about this server because if something goes wrong with any service or any component about this server, you as administrator, you will have a lot of tickets and issues, right? So we have a load balancer, right, in order to distribute all the connections among all these servers. We have two different load balancers. One is the hardware, okay, is the most reliable, but also is expensive. Or we can create a load balancer using the DNS, round robin, right? So how it works, the DNS internally will send the connection to the different servers in the pool. In that way, we can have that load balancer, okay? So also this role needs the file server. Also, we need to have the high availability solution here, more than one server, and Microsoft has a fault tolerant solution for file server called DFS. Okay, so the front end also we need to have co-located other services, for example, the enterprise voice. And again, for example, Omar is hosted in that server, let's say in the server number 2. So Omar has enterprise voice enabled and all that information is stored in this server. Obviously, we need to have all the enterprise voice infrastructure. This can be a carrier, for example, AT&T or any other carrier, right? So they provide the PBX, the gateways, and everything that is able to connect to the PSTN. Continue talking about the front end. Also here, we can collocate the monitoring and archiving roles. This is very important for the administrators because here we can be proactive, right? We can see if a specific server is having some problems. We can keep an eye in all the infrastructure to identify if something is wrong, to act very quick before, again, we receive several tickets from specific users, okay? The archiving is for metrics and get all the reports about the environment, okay? As I stated before, the enterprise voice solution is gonna have access to the PSTN, okay? And for example, let's talk about another computer different as Windows. Let's say Omar has a Mac Pro for to use the day-to-day activities, and this Mac Pro doesn't have Office installed. But what if you are in a presentation and you have a file, a PowerPoint, let's say, and you need to project in the conference, so you can use this server, the Office web app. It's something like the email. When you have an attachment, you have an option to preview the information. Somewhere there is a Office installed in order to use the PowerPoint, right? It's the same here. We need to have this farm. Again, for high availability purposes, we need to have more than one server, and it's how it works. Also, we can have integrated Exchange server. In another video, Mar, we can explain in deep how the Exchange server works. The best practices is to have 16 servers, right? 2 different sites in a high availability. But let's say all those 16 servers, they are represented in this diagram as only one box. So is part of the Skype for Business solution because you are able to, let's say, send meeting invites, right? So that invite will be stored in Outlook, okay? Also use the email to send that invite to different people is the reason why we need the Exchange server. Also, after 15 minutes that you stop talking or chatting with somebody, that conversation is saved in your mailbox. Is the reason why we need Exchange server in the Skype for Business environment. Another service or technology that can be integrated is the SharePoint because sometimes you need to store information in different sites or libraries, right? So you can integrate SharePoint in your solution. I would like to be clear that not necessarily you need to have Exchange and Skype for Business integrated. Some roles, they are, let's say, optional, right? And the another is the director. This is, let's say, another security layer. All the communications and requests for the users, if you have this role, this server will authenticate the user before it goes to the front end. This role is optional also. So if you don't have this role in your environment, so that connection goes directly to the front end, okay? Persistent chat depends on the business. Sometimes it's mandatory to keep all the conversation stored in somewhere, right? So in Skype for Business, they use the persistent chat, also has some SQL databases, and it doesn't matter who is talking in a group, all that conversation is safe. For example, think in that companies that they have 3 shifts, right? So wherever the user in the shift number 1 is talking in the group, that information will be available for the second shift in that company, okay? What else? The DMZ. So we have a very important role here is the edge. The edge is the responsible to receive all the requests from the external users, right? Also, we have here a load balancer, right? And again, as I stated before, is the responsible to get requests from federated domains, other technologies like Skype or any other chat system, okay, external users. Also, we have high availability here in case that something goes wrong with a server, or you need to, let's say, maintenance a server. The second one will be able to continue working without any impact to the users. Also, if you have a mobile device and you are trying to connect to the Skype for Business organization, that request goes to the reverse proxy. So it's important to have a reverse proxy also in the DMC. So Omar is the reason why I guess this is very, let's say, complex environment, right? Because it has a lot of roles.
Sure.
And
Definitely, the complexity of Skype is really major, and that's just from the perspective of the roles in Skype for Business. But for example, one of the major issues that I got in my project when we transitioned to level 2, level 3 support of the Skype environment was to completely unrelated or not completely coming from Skype. For example, we got basically a rogue network administrator that was making changes to one router. He didn't have a change request or anything open. He was basically just doing some testing, and he impacted completely a pool in a region because several ports were suddenly closed and they were necessary to Skype to function correctly. So when open, obviously we get a P1. Basically, my role was checking everything, every server in the pool in Skype, and basically prove that there was not an issue on our infrastructure. So they can move on to the network team, and they finally got able to identify where the problem was located.
yeah, I do remember an issue, also very common issue, right? That because Skype for Business in the corporate firewalls, it needs a lot of ports, right, for video. So I do remember a very common issue that there is a very bad quality in the voice or video for external users. And after research, everything, you realize that some ports in the firewall, they are closed. So you need to work with the security team or network team, follow up, make sure that those ports are open. Obviously, you need to justify why you need all of these ports, right? And after that, the problem is solved. And you say, hey, this is not an Skype for Business issue, right? It's not part of my activities or my duties, but at the end of the day, you need to troubleshoot and you will realize that the problem is in another team, not necessarily in the messaging team, right? Yeah, you're right.
Sure. Other weird things that I've noticed, for example, was we were having problems with the web client on one of these link servers. Um, whenever, for example, they got a third-party vendor or anything that was not running in Skype and wanted to join a meeting, they got the option, for example, just use the web client and connect. But for some reason, that wasn't working as expected. So they needed to get this link-based client, Skype for Business-based client. But if the user didn't have any rights to install anything in their computer, there obviously was not an option with them. So we opened a case with Microsoft, and we finally pinpoint these to .NET Framework security patching in the server. So either removing or disabling via a registry keys were enough to fix the problem. But all the thing process to get to that port was that point was really, really complex.
This is important to mention that when the new employees comes to this company, right, we transfer all of these experiences and knowledge, and in order to be success in the project when they get a project, for example, in Skype for Business, right? So this is another very good thing that the company has, that they have managers, trainers, where we transmit all these knowledge and experiences for the new candidates, right, on the new consultants. Also, we train how to troubleshoot, how to start from the basics, right? Checking the connectivity, as you already said. And in some point, you realize that maybe the problem is a switch, is in the network, access point, or storage in the databases. Also, another important activity as administrators is you remember all of those boxes, the different roles that we have in the Skype for Business. every single month we need to install all the security patches, right? So you as administrators, you need to perform this kind of maintenance without affect any user. And let's say some companies, they have 24 hours working, right? So in some point you need to deploy the maintenance, and is the reason why it's very important when you are designing a new solution, keep in mind these kind of activities, because you need to deploy the high availability in order to, let's say, start working in a server. Great maintenance can be in the operating system, can be a hardware issue or hardware maintenance, but without affect the users, right?
Sure, definitely. There's a lot of factors to weigh in. And one of the things we noticed after a few years in the company is that a lot of the things that you're going to work with, or the issues that you want to try to resolve, somebody else already worked on it before. So having that on your back, the whole team, the whole support infrastructure, that maybe just talking with someone who has been working in that for several years would, if not help you solve directly, at least give you a starting point. So
Exactly.
it is great to having someone in your back that could, you could at least discuss that. Most of the time when you're in a company, you are brought as the expert, so it's not as easy as internally just try to have this conversation, because you are supposed to already have all this experience behind you. So having the team, the support team, your co-workers, the people that work with you in the batch, and having this conversation is really great to
Yeah.
help the troubleshooting step.
Everyone shares the best practices, experiences, and how to work in this kind of thing. For example, another very important process is the change management process, right? So we need to take care about follow, because all the companies, they have different change management process, and so we need to follow. But I mean, it's great to know all of these kind of process that the large companies, they have in place. What else, Omar? What other project you have been working with?
Sure. Once that one was completed, my next project was in New Mexico. It was an electric company there. It was probably, you could say, a smaller company. It was three between 3,000 and 4,000 mailboxes. Um, this was an exchange project. This company was trying to migrate from Exchange 2010 to Exchange 2013, but they got a third-party company that come and helped us setting up these Exchange 2013 servers and start migrating the users. But one of the things that they noticed is that the performance for the users that were migrated to 2013 was way worse than the ones that went 2010, which is completely opposite that you would expect.
Yeah.
So they wanted to bring an in-house Exchange engineer to help them with the troubleshooting and basically get this thing up and running. They brought some Microsoft people just to do a quick check of the servers. They analyzed and give them basically a list of red focus, red flags that they find in the environment that they wanted them to correct in order to basically improve the performance of the server. So as part of my role, yeah, that was definitely figure out what's the problem with this migration, and also make sure that all Microsoft recommendations were implemented. So there was a lot of work, for example, with the configuration of the virtual machines. This Exchange 2013 were all virtual servers. So things like the paging, the free disk space, the storage performance, that was all considered part of this. Web directories configuration. There were a lot of things running there. So also during the troubleshooting was found out that basically the storage that the server was running was not the best for Exchange or communication server. So just moving to this host to a different storage solution was just by that was a great performance leap, a great improvement. So in this case, managing the servers, patching the servers, and eventually you're a contractor, so the servers will be managed by the Windows server eventually, just back to how they were before. So giving this knowledge transfer, giving them the best practices, documentation, that was also part of my role on this project.
Yeah, the documentation is critical, right? So create some diagrams and with specifying protocols, ports, and all the flow in the exchange case. Document all the mail flow policies and all the most important cases for exchange. But in that project, looks like the planning and designing of that migration was not the correct, right?
Yeah, it seems they either didn't have an architect for the solution and they just hired a small regional company to do that, or maybe they started themselves. As mentioned, this exchange solution was managed by Windows servers, so maybe they just spin some servers and try to figure out by themselves. But yeah, definitely the planning was not ideal. And the management was initially pretty unhappy with 2013. They were basically blaming this for the performance, when all the steps, like you mentioned, the planning and the configuration could have um, bring this project with almost zero affectance to the end user.
Yeah, part of the planning and designing a new migration, there is something very important that is called the exchange calculator, right? The exchange calculator will help us to define the sizing of the servers. How many servers do you need? For example, if you have 20,000 users, pretty much you're gonna have like 25,000 mailboxes, right? Because we have resource mailboxes, share mailboxes, more than users. So is the reason we are going to have more. So how many servers do we need? The sizing of those servers, how many, let's say, CPU, memory, storage, all of these kind of resources in the servers. There is a tool or different tools that can help us as architects, right, to define the best solution, the best design for the new environment. Have you ever heard about the exchange calculator, Omar?
Yeah, definitely. It's part of the toolbox that has been recommended during the training, making sure if we are either working in an architect role or this initial planning phases is one of the tools that we need to run initially.
I would like to share this file, right? This is a spreadsheet about the exchange calculator. Depends of the color is the information that you will input. And with that information, that tool will give you all the information about the servers, databases, how many databases, where they need to host those databases. Also will suggest the storage can be RAID, can be JBOT, just a bunch of these, right? That this is the new solution that Exchange 2016, Exchange 2018 supports. But it's really nice, first of all, knows that this kind of tools exist and also use it because will be very helpful, right? Also, you can project, let's say in a 2 or 3 years, how many storage do you need, right? So also we will suggest depends of the number of mailboxes and the size of each mailbox will suggest what kind of technology you need to implement in the storage, right? So it's really, let's say, helpful and amazing know all of these tools that obviously we get this information in the training before goes to the project. But if you are in a project and you don't know something like this, again, we have a team behind us that can help us with this kind of best practices and workarounds and what is the best way to design a new migration. Okay, what else, Omar? What was your next project?
Sure. And in my third project, that was basically the last one that I got for this company, I was working for basically a car part manufacturer, and they got a lot of clients. Well, they got a lot of plants all around the world, and a lot of clients that include all the major car manufacturers like Ford, Chrysler, etc. But in this case, my role was also as an exchange engineer, but they had a need for also an Office 365 expert. They were starting a migration from an existing Exchange on premises Exchange 2007 infrastructure to Office 365. They already have some consultants in place, basically IBM was actually leading that, the architectural part. So they already spin off a couple of Exchange 2013 servers to help set up the hybrid environment, but they still have the need to assist during the migration of over 9,000 mailboxes that were already in the company, as mentioned in this Exchange 2007 servers. They got all around close to 27 Exchange 2007 servers or so, all around the world. All of these sites have different connection speeds between both headquarters or to the internet. So all these basically statistics or real life scenarios were needed to put in place. Within this migration, they also acquired a different manufacturing company, and they were basically a mix of environments. They got 13 different Active Directory domains.
Wow.
Each of these have their own mailbox solution that could be an Exchange on premises in several different versions, Exchange 2010, 13, etc. One of them was already in an Office 365 tenant. They got one in Google G Suite. So integrated first to all of them from that environment to the same Active Directory environment was the first challenge. Third-party tool like Quest Migration Tool was used in this case to bring all the user mailboxes. But in the case of, these Active Directory accounts, but in the case of the mailboxes, the simplest solution was another third-party tool called BitTitan Migration Wiz. In this case, what it allowed us is to connect directly to basically the endpoints of each of these email environments, whether it was Exchange on-prem, O365, or Google, and then connect them to their corresponding Office 365 mailboxes, and gradually do this migration. They got over 4,000 users that were all within this environment. The largest of these basically subdomains was around 1,000 users, and they got extremely small ones that were 50 or 100 users on the end. So
Okay.
it was pretty complex.
Yeah, we can talk in another video about the migration process from Exchange on-prem. It doesn't matter what version, for example, 2007, 2010, 2013, 2016 to Office 365, the best approach, the best practices, and how to do this kind of migration. As you mentioned, we have third-party tools, right? Or also we can do it with native Microsoft tools, right? PowerShell, basically. So Omar, for the next video, I will invite you. So now it's gonna be my turn to explain about my experiences. Right now, I am a manager in this company and trainer. So I will explain to all our friends the whole process, but let's talk in the next video. Thank you so much, Omar.
Oh, thanks to you, Tony. Have a great day.
You too, bye.